For decades, Dune was the graveyard of science fiction movies. Millions of dollars burned on an unfilmable dream. It is a tragedy of wasted potential. David Lynch tried to compress it. He failed miserably. Alejandro Jodorowsky tried to hallucinate it into existence. He failed too. Dune was the ultimate cinematic death trap. It was considered impossible to adapt. But then, Denis Villeneuve did something radical. He stopped trying to just film the spectacle. He built an architecture instead, and it resulted in a magnificent $715 million masterpiece. Now look at Tron over the years, a series of million-dollar neon tombstones presented as movies. Tron was handed the exact same blank check. Decades of nostalgia and infinite visual potential were at their fingertips, but Disney refused to admit defeat, and they paid the ultimate price for their stubbornness. It has failed the exact same way, and Disney still does not understand why. 3 separate times over 40 agonizing years, they blame the marketing, they blame the timing or the cultural shifts. Just stop defending it. Disney didn't just mismanage a promising franchise, they fundamentally misunderstand how stories actually work. So we are going to take apart the machine. We are looking closely at the structural blueprints to show you exactly why Dune will be remembered forever, and Tron will always be dead on arrival. Every story begins with a profound choice, a fundamental decision about what the narrative actually means. This blueprint dictates how the plot delivers that meaning to the audience. Dune and Tron make completely different choices at this architectural level, and those early decisions cascade through everything that follows. Let's look closely at the graveyard of Dune adaptations. For decades, Frank Herbert's novel was an absolute cinematic death trap. Alejandro Jodorowsky treated the book like a psychedelic religious text. He chased boundless, unfilmable ambition. The project predictably collapsed. It died before a single frame was ever shot. Then David Lynch stepped up to the plate in 1984. Lynch tried to compress an 800-page political manifesto into 2 hours. He crammed it full of whispered exposition and rushed lore. It was a complete structural disaster. You simply cannot compress this story without breaking it. Removing the breathing room destroys the fragile cause and effect chain of Arrakis. Denis Villeneuve understood this perfectly. He did not just want to make a movie, he wanted to create an experience that respected the source material, and he knew that meant demanding unprecedented studio compromise. He looked at the wreckage of past failures and issued a strict ultimatum. He refused to shoot the movie unless the studio let him split the book. This wasn't some greedy corporate cash grab. It was an absolute structural necessity. Villeneuve gave the complex narrative the essential space it needed to breathe. He framed Dune as a terrifying cautionary tale about messianic politics. Paul Atreides is not a hero to be celebrated. He is a tragic, terrifying warning. Every single scene is meticulously built around delivering that specific argument. This is the fundamental difference between a visionary and a studio manager. Dune starts with a powerful meaning and carefully builds spectacle around it. Now compare that discipline to Disney's approach with Tron. What is Tron actually about? Seriously, what is the central thesis of this franchise? The original 1982 film is just a programmer trying to escape a neon maze. It gestures vaguely at corporate greed and artificial intelligence, but it commits to absolutely nothing. It is a brilliant premise desperately searching for a valid point, and Disney absolutely refused to learn from this mistake. Disney did not care about the underlying meaning of Tron. They cared about selling toys and pushing technological boundaries. When Joseph Kosinski pitched Tron Legacy, he didn't bring a completed script. He brought a shiny visual effects test of the new light cycles. Disney handed over $170 million based purely on a vibe. Kosinski is a brilliant architect of visual spaces, but he was not equipped to build the narrative skeleton, and Disney did not bother to help him find one. The entire script was literally reverse engineered just to justify those cool visuals. They even let the Daft Punk score dictate the emotional pacing over the dialogue. And Tron Ares repeated this exact same unforgivable sin entirely. It delivered cutting-edge visual commentary on artificial intelligence, but it completely forgot to write compelling human beings. Disney iterated their visual effects for 40 years. They just sat back and hoped the narrative would magically fix itself. Dune starts with meaning and builds a world to safely support it. Tron starts with spectacle and prays that meaning will eventually show up. But what happens when you actually put these massive machines into motion?
A blueprint is just a static, lifeless plan. The structural engine is what actually makes the story move. It is the grinding, relentless mechanics of escalation. It is the cause and effect chain that makes audiences aggressively lean forward. Villeneuve's Dune operates on a ruthless principle of escalating cost. Villeneuve understands that tension requires a credible threat. The Emperor's betrayal is meticulously set up from the very first frame. Every piece on the chessboard is moved with deliberate, terrifying precision. There is no wasted motion in the entire film. Every single decision Paul makes pushes him closer to absolute power, and every step rips away another vital piece of his humanity. Every political victory is simultaneously a devastating moral loss. This is narrative engineering at its absolute most disciplined. The Harkonnen attack on House Atreides isn't just a random action sequence. It is the brutal, inevitable consequence of the political maneuvering we just watched. Spectacle in Dune is always deeply consequential. Take the iconic sandworm riding sequence, for example. It isn't just an excuse to flex a massive CGI budget. It is a heavy, unavoidable structural threshold. Paul crosses from a vulnerable outsider into a terrifying religious leader. The massive spectacle physically and spiritually transforms him forever. Now look directly at Tron's structural engine. It suffers from a catastrophic, fundamental flaw. It generates endless motion, but absolutely zero momentum. Tron, on the other hand, is nothing but wasted motion. Things constantly happen on the glowing neon grid. Programs fight, identity discs are thrown, and sleek light cycles race. But the cause and effect chains are completely broken. Characters do not drive the plot through agonizing internal choices. They are passively shoved around by overwhelming external digital forces. Sam Flynn is entirely reactive throughout his entire journey, and reactive protagonists bleed all the tension out of a story. The villains are cartoonish caricatures of corporate executives. They bark orders, but they never truly threaten the protagonist's soul. The stakes are entirely superficial. The neon suits look cool, but they do not protect against bad writing. The famous light cycle sequences illustrate this failure perfectly. They are undeniably gorgeous pieces of digital art. But what do they actually change about the story? In Dune, the sandworm ride alters the entire political landscape of Arrakis permanently. In Tron, the light cycle chase is just a flashy, hollow detour. It begins and ends without meaningfully altering the characters or the central stakes. This is the agonizing difference between a set piece that serves the story and a set piece that desperately tries to be the story itself. Tron treats its action sequences as the ultimate destination. But an action sequence cannot hold up the colossal weight of a movie. For that, you need something much, much heavier. Every well-constructed narrative has crucial, load-bearing moments. These are the vital scenes that carry the emotional weight of the entire structure. They are the intimate, quiet moments that make the massive spectacle actually matter. Denis Villeneuve is an absolute master of the load-bearing scene. He understands that the most powerful cinematic moments are often the quietest. Look closely at the Gom Jabbar test in the first film. Think about the sheer audacity of the Gom Jabbar scene.
Villeneuve stakes the entire emotional core of the film on a silent stare-down. He trusts his actors, and he trusts the intelligence of his audience. Paul simply puts his hand in a dark box. His mother nervously recites a litany outside the locked door. That is literally it. There is no massive CGI explosion or sweeping desert battle. It is just two tense people in a dimly lit room. The tension is so thick, you could cut it with a crysknife. Yet this scene does more narrative work than most blockbusters do in 2 hours. It rapidly establishes the ruthless philosophy of the Bene Gesserit order. It introduces the central thematic tension between human will and institutional control. It is intimate, it is terrifying, and it is built entirely on character. Now look at the missing foundation of the Tron franchise. Tron's problem is not that it lacks memorable images. Daft Punk's roaring electronic score and the glowing grid are genuinely brilliant. But memorable images are not the same thing as load-bearing scenes. A structural anchor requires deep, complex character interiority. The audience must intensely feel what a character is agonizing over. Tron constantly fails to construct these crucial, emotionally resonant moments. Tron never trusts its audience for a single second. It relies on flashing lights to distract from the empty dialogue. In Tron Legacy, the reunion between Sam and Kevin Flynn should be devastating. A son finally finds the father who abandoned him decades ago. This should be the emotional spine that holds the entire movie together. Instead, it plays out like a mandatory video game checkpoint. Sam finds Kevin. When Sam Flynn reunites with his father, the music swells. But the emotional register remains completely flat. Jeff Bridges is doing his best, but he is acting in a vacuum. There is no history behind their eyes, only perfectly rendered pixels. They exchange some incredibly stiff, exposition-heavy dialogue. The story just thoughtlessly marches on. The scene completely refuses to excavate the emotional terrain of abandonment. There is no deep confrontation over the years of quiet resentment. Compare that to any quiet conversation between Paul and Jessica in Dune. Every single interaction is suffocating under the weight of genetic destiny and guilt. Tron's characters don't carry any weight because the film never gives them any. This is exactly why Dune endures and Tron constantly evaporates. Dune's load-bearing moments create permanent emotional memory. Tron's spectacle only creates a fleeting visual memory, and visual novelty is a rapidly depreciating cinematic asset. So, if Tron's neon empire is built entirely on unstable sand, can it ever be fixed? Or is this doomed franchise destined to fail for another 40 years?
The Tron franchise is suffering from a fatal, terminal disease. Let's call it spectacle dependency. Spectacle dependency is destroying modern blockbuster cinema. It is the reason so many massive franchises feel entirely disposable. They are terrified of silence and terrified of character complexity. It is a deeply broken, hollow narrative architecture. Visual innovation is forcefully asked to do the heavy lifting of character and theme. The glowing digital effects are essentially load-bearing walls built entirely on sand. Without a foundation of coherent dramatic structure, the spectacle supports absolutely nothing. It wildly impresses in the moment and completely evaporates shortly afterward. And this is dangerously compounded by a massive world-building gap. Arrakis is a fully functioning, brutally harsh ecosystem. Water scarcity and giant worms operate by highly consistent, unforgiving rules. Those physical and ecological constraints create massive dramatic stakes. The grid in Tron changes its rules whenever the plot is stuck. Programs magically act exactly like humans whenever it is convenient. This narrative inconsistency isn't liberating creative freedom, it is profound structural negligence. When an audience cannot predict what is actually possible, they cannot invest in the stakes. So here is the definitive Cineforge Effects prescription. If Disney ever wants to genuinely fix this franchise, they must rebuild the foundation. If Tron is ever going to resurrect itself, it requires a complete teardown. First, choose an actual thesis and fiercely commit to it. Decide exactly what the grid means about digital consciousness or algorithmic control. Second, build a protagonist with actual psychological interiority. Give them a wound that deeply matters and an active arc that drives the plot. Third, clearly codify the rules of the world and dramatize their harsh consequences. It requires a writer who respects the grid enough to give it rules. It requires a director who understands that action must have consequences. Fourth, actually earn your massive visual spectacle. If a light cycle sequence can be removed without changing the story, absolutely delete it. Dune succeeds because Denis Villeneuve built it like solid architecture. Dune proves that audiences are starving for genuine architectural depth. They want to be challenged, not just pacified with bright colors. Every single element is load-bearing and serves a terrifying central meaning. Disney has all the money in the world, but money cannot buy narrative momentum. It can only buy a more expensive tombstone. Tron failed because it was built like a fleeting theme park ride, thrilling in the moment, but completely forgotten by the time you leave. The visual language of Tron remains incredibly iconic, but raw potential without rigorous structure is just a hollow light show. And audiences do not come back for light shows. They come back for stories.